Hello and welcome to the Unique CPA with your host, Randy Crabtree. We're committed to creating a thriving community of accounting professionals who are physically and mentally healthy, fulfilled, and energized by their work. Our ultimate goal is to elevate the reputation of the accounting profession and vastly improve the lives of those in it. The Unique CPA is brought to you by Tri-Merit, the specialty tax professionals.
Today our guest is Rich Kane. Rich is a CPA. He's actually Director of Business Services for a firm in the Chicago suburbs, and he is a QuickBooks guru. I think he's been a QuickBooks Pro advisor for 25, 26 years now, top 100 for at least 6 years, and on the QuickBooks Pro advisor side. Rich and I have a few things in common. We are both CPAs. We are both in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. And we are both stroke survivors, which is going to be a theme of our discussion today. But before we get into that, Rich, welcome to the Unique CPA.
Well, Randy, I wish we could be talking about a different subject today, but it's kind of important. But yeah, you're part of a club that I guess not many people really want to join, but there are people out there that unfortunately do suffer a stroke, and there are a lot of survivors out there.
Yep, which is good that we have survivors. It's I know you probably have heard this before, but I've heard people say, "Well, he's a stroke victim." I go, "No, we're survivors. We're not victims. We got through this." So, before we get into the stroke talk, though, I gave you a quick intro. Anything you want to expand there? I know the QuickBooks side of things I think is pretty impactful and important to you, but other things, anything else you want to highlight there?
Oh, I love the networking.
Yep.
I love meeting people, whether it be in accounting phase. I'm a QuickBooks guy. I go out to parties and stuff like that. I like to talk to people and kind of get to know them.
Yeah.
And it's been really good for me on that aspect.
Yeah, and you and I actually met kind of at a party for the first time. That was at our live podcast last August. That was a lot of fun, and I'm glad I got to meet you there. That was great. And I know you specifically wanted to meet Scott Scarano there, and you got to do that, right?
I did. He was one of my idols there,
Yeah, he's a great guy. Scott and I'm on his faculty for Accounting High this year, so not sure what that means, but we'll find out shortly.
He's got a great sense of humor and a great way of doing things. He's just great to talk with.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, he definitely is. All right. So the reason we're talking stroke today is actually yesterday was World Stroke Day, which is an important day, recognizing stroke and stroke survivors and stroke awareness. And so I did an episode like this about 3.5 years ago where I talked to another CPA who's a stroke survivor. And we did this in May, which is Stroke Awareness Month. And I've always wanted to do this around World Stroke Day too. So let's get into this. And I think the best place to start is just tell us your stroke story. What happened and how did you know, I guess, and the whole thing. You know how to tell a stroke story. We all do. All survivors do.
All survivors do. And interesting enough, I have some family history. My father suffered a stroke, and I think he was about 68 at the time. His sister had one. He had a massive stroke. He was an attorney and practicing, and one day he had just couldn't get up, and my mother rushed him to the hospital, and he had suffered a stroke where he lost his speech, his walking capabilities. He was a real mess. So I was very familiar with the stroke side.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm in my 40s, you never think of this. You thought your dad had a stroke. All right, I got to be worried. And when I'm in my mid 60s, and I was I think it was about 44 years old.
Wow.
And to my recollection, being in the Midwest, there was a snowstorm. And it was one of those heavy, wet snows.
Yep.
And I was really took a lot out of me to do the shoveling. And a couple days later, I developed a headache. All right, I'm prone to migraines, no big deal. And, you take something for it, and it just doesn't seem to want to go away. All right. So then 2 days, 3 days into this headache is not releasing. You're starting to get concerned, abnormal for you. And so you call the doctor and he prescribes something for you. And 2 days later, this headache is not going away. And then I wound up going to the urgent care. They had, at that time, it was first thing in the morning, you could see a doctor at your doctor's facilities. And I was there, and they tried something else, and they tried something else again. And I ended up back at the urgent care again. There was something that was just not right. This headache was absolutely not releasing. And it was a Tuesday morning, and had a client to see, and it was also tax season, I will tell you.
Yeah, I was
You know what
thinking
that's
that.
like?
Yep.
And I'm trying so hard to put in those hours to get some of the work done. And it was in February. So it was really the start of it. And, you're pushing, you just can't take the time to relax because you're pushing to get your accounting work done. So I was leaving to go for a client. I needed to stop and get gas. And I pull up to the tank, and I try and open, the gas tank knob. And I'm realizing there's something wrong here. You're not opening. There's something wrong here. Something's not happening right. So I noticed, all right, I'm I'm right by the house, and I drove home and immediately called one of my friends, and she knew right away what was going on. And I was slurring my words, and she says, you're able to walk? She goes, open the front door. And I went and I opened the front door, and I can just tell you within 4 minutes, the paramedics were there.
Wow.
Somebody who knew what was happening and was astute enough to do the exact right thing.
Yep. Yep. And that's so important.
Yep.
And then, so you got to the hospital quickly. What was that like?
It was interesting. I was slurring my words, but the paramedics walked in, and I walked up to greet them.
Uh-huh.
That wasn't like, oh, you're walking here. Well, you better sit down here.
Right.
I'm not knowing what's going on.
Yep.
And my friend drives over and goes with us to the hospital. It was probably my first ride in an ambulance. So they got me there, but they started giving me some sort of intravenous in my arm and stuff like that right away on the trip there. And it was frightening to me, that I
Oh,
will
yeah.
tell you. I
Oh,
was
yeah.
not knowing what was going on. I couldn't talk. I could walk, but I couldn't talk. It was just so strange to me.
Mm-hmm.
And trying to communicate, if my friend Susan was not with me, I would not have been able to iterate. It's a very scary feeling. And then they take you in for an MRI, and when you've really never been sick, you really never I've never had a hospital stay before,
Yep.
like, all right, that's like, okay, I'm in the emergency room. But as the day started to progress on, my my speech started to come back,
Right.
so I was beginning to start to talk again. And in the emergency room, they're taking me for a CAT scan, an MRI. I still have the intravenous in me. I gotta tell you, it gets crazy in an emergency room.
Oh, yeah.
I had a pee. So I got up, and there was a urinal, and I walked over to the urinal to go pee. It was just my natural thing. And some nurse yells, "Wait, what are you doing? What are you doing?" It's like, and then she gives me this thing like an egg carton to finish peeing, and
Oh,
it's like it
yeah.
went all over the place. Like, no, why don't you just let me finish peeing? Like, oh no, you're not supposed to. You're not supposed to be doing that. You're supposed to
Right.
be laying down. And I was at a hospital that wasn't a stroke center.
Yep.
So they didn't really explain to me what was going on, but they said, we're going to need to transfer you to a different hospital.
Oh, wow.
So at that point, I did hear them say the words flight for life.
Oh.
That was scary. Get the helicopter. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that's not,
That's not good.
all right, not good. But then they said my vitals seem to have regulated, and I was able to take a private ambulance to another facility where they specialized in strokes.
All right. So you got to the right place.
Got to the right place, and at 11:30 at night had another CAT scan, and the first thing in the morning they did a angiogram with me.
Okay.
Kind of check to see what was going on. So the neurologist came in and basically said, I had heard that someone said something like a TIA.
Yep.
Um,
That's a mini stroke is what they called, and that's what they originally thought I had as well. But
Hmm.
I think because your age, because I was 51 at the time, probably 44, that's just what they think. They think, okay, well, you're too young to have a stroke. And in reality, TAA basically leaves no damage in the brain, where the stroke does leave damage in the brain.
Right.
And
Right.
so how did they figure out it was actually a full-fledged stroke?
From some of the tests that they did, the neurologist came in and said, just letting you know, you had a stroke.
Yep. Okay. Yep.
Okay. Flat out, you had a stroke. So, and it was called a dissection of the carotid artery.
Okay.
Okay. So on my left side of my face, like when you're in a fitness class and they say, okay, find your carotid
All
artery. It was
right.
on the left side and it split.
That's serious.
Yep. And I believe, like I said, I got the headache 2 days after the shoveling of the snow. So to my thinking is it was the shoveling of the snow and putting all that pressure on that unfortunately snapped the artery.
Right.
But it wasn't in a place where they felt it could do surgery that it would heal on its own.
Okay.
So I was very lucky with that. I had to start a blood thinner routine. They put me on Coumadin.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's the strong stuff.
That was the strong stuff, and having to get regulated and get all these tests, 3 times a week to check the levels. And I'm not a guy that likes medical needles. It's not one of my not one of my favorites.
Yep. You need to get used to it though at some point, and that's what I did. I didn't like them either, but man, I got poked and prodded so much. Needles don't mean anything anymore to me,
Hmm.
which is, I guess, a good thing.
Right. So I was in the hospital for like 3 days, and they sent me on home, being on Coumadin and a regimen. And I do recall hearing a swishing sound in my ears, a thumping sound in my ears, and
Hmm.
I was a little that frightened me as well.
Oh yeah. Yep. I mean, after, and I'm assuming, and we're probably jumping ahead a little bit, but after the stroke, every single little thing you feel in your body you think is about to be another stroke, at least for me. And I'm see you nodding
Hmm.
along,
Hmm.
and the same thing. So let's talk about that. 3 days in the hospital then. Tax season, February. How quick did you go back to work?
I didn't go back to the office until the end of March.
Okay. But still tax season.
Still tax season, and the great company that I worked for, very supportive. And they felt, after I'm home a couple of weeks and I'm starting to adjust again, they brought me some work to try it from home.
Okay.
It was a slow go.
Yeah, for sure. What about, when this happened, you couldn't speak. It sounded like you could move, but couldn't speak. Did speech come back pretty quick? How did that?
Yeah, speech came back about 3, 4 in the afternoon.
Okay. And how about other deficits? Was there other things?
So, you know, right away, I did kind of notice that my balance was not great. And
Okay.
that's been the way since the stroke happened. I can't be on let's say you're going to give me a balance beam to walk on. Wouldn't do so good. Or a straight line or just something. And when I go for some work with a personal trainer, we tend to sometimes work a lot on balance
Okay.
because, let's see, the stroke was on, I think, my left side. So I just, on one side, I'm better at balance than the
Right.
other. So that's one of the things that has been a residual. Another residual that I have is I'm more perkier. I better at mornings than I am in the evenings.
Okay.
I can read the newspaper in the morning really good. My mornings tend to be good, but by 7, 8 o'clock at night, I can't really read. My attention span is just not great in the evenings.
Okay. So kind of a long-term fatigue issue with the
Hmm.
post-stroke, and which is not uncommon either. So segue into a couple things. But first, based on what you just said, I assume you try to front load your high concentration work in the morning, because it sounds like,
Yes.
is this something that's been a change, post stroke for you, from a business
Yes.
standpoint? Okay.
Yep. Yep.
Let's talk about that. How does this affect your professional life? I mean, you took about whatever, you happened in February, you went back the end of March, but
Hmm.
that's the immediate thing. Overall, other than the timing of when you work on projects, how has it affected your professional life?
I'm very lucky in that it hasn't affected it greatly. Although I type of business that I deal with is the small business. When you bring me up to the bigger boys and stuff like that, too much numbers can get to me, charts and graphs and stuff like that. Interpreting key performance indicators and stuff like that. It can be a little rough on the brain
Yep.
there.
Yep.
In general, that part of the brain seems to be working fine. I'm great with clients. I remember a lot of stuff. It's other than the work stuff, I forget a lot of stuff. I'm
Okay.
noticing that too.
So memory issues.
Some memory issues or something like, you forget, oh, I need to grab this and this at the store.
Yep.
And you get to the store, like, what was on the list? Was I was supposed to get? I reminded myself like 6 times.
Yep.
Or I've got that phobia where I go in from one room to go get something in the kitchen, and then along the way, you have to stop to do something else, and you get somewhere else and you're waylaid because of that, and you don't get to your original thing.
Right.
That's what I have.
So when this happened, this is not the current firm that you're working at now that you
Right.
were working at the time. So I feel comfortable asking it. How did they react to it? Were they supportive? Were they, yeah,
Very supportive, especially when you deal with a firm that's got some people in there. Everyone wants to kind of live in, working to give you a hand.
right,
It's not like something that was just a two-person, or you're working for yourself and then you're really kind of screwed if you happen to run into some sort of issue like that.
right. So, okay. So support, and that's so important. I had that with work as well, and with family and everybody else was supporting. But even with that support, and we kind of talked about it a little bit, there's an emotional aspect to this, a mental aspect to being a stroke survivor, because I mean, and I say this to people all the time, when you have a stroke, you've got like 10 million things running through your mind at the same time. Like, how did this happen? Will it happen again? I'm going to die when I feel a twinge in my head next time. I'm not, all these things. And for me, that was a huge part of recovery. Was the emotional and mental aspect a big part for you as well?
Yes, very much so.
And what, can you kind of explain that to us?
Every time I get a headache,
Yep.
it's like, uh-oh, is this causing a problem? Or I get a pain in the back of my head where it was part of the headache problem when I had the stroke. Uh-oh, am I, having an issue? Having a bad day where at night you're just so tired and keeps reminding you
Yep.
of the stroke. I so badly want to learn to play the guitar,
Yeah.
but I'm finding it's just too difficult for me because of the stroke,
Okay.
because you have to do four things at once.
Yeah.
You need your right arm to do the strumming, your left or your right hand, your left hand to do the finding of the chords in the place on the bar. You need to be reading the music is three, and then if you have a metronome going to keep you in your time,
Yeah.
it's just way too hard for me.
Okay.
Way too hard. So have given up on that, but it's basically because of the stroke. I can't do those things which come easy to people.
Right. Yeah. Well, not to me. It never did. But I have played guitar. That's about as far as I can say because I'm not good at it. But I haven't. That was pre-stroke too. I wasn't good at it. So, um, um, but that's good. How about other things? I mean, you're tired in the evening, forgetful.
Right. And sometimes you get depression.
Yep.
It just, I guess, goes along sometimes with the territory, or somebody else has a stroke. You understand it, especially somebody young.
Yep.
It's like you're too young. You're like, why would you want to join my club?
Right.
You know,
Yep.
it was not the right. It's you just have this empathy for other people that have suffered it, and you know what they're going through, and you kind of attune to the the signs of a stroke and items like that.
Yep. I think it's really important for us as survivors to, create awareness. I try to talk about this as often as I can when I'm very fortunate I get to go out and present a lot. I don't do it as much as I used to, which I really should, but I'll go through the whole acronym of identifying a stroke. And that's, I think, for me, and I've talked about my stroke story on this before, and you and I didn't go over it much, but for me, I also got to the hospital fast or quickly, I should say. And the reason that I did is because I recognized the signs of a stroke when it started to happen. And I was actually with my brother, which is very
Oh,
fortunate. Yeah, because as soon as it started happening, I looked at him. I said, I'm having a stroke. Get me to the hospital. By the time he got to me, I lost the ability to speak and my whole left side went dead. And so the reason that I knew that I was having it, because there's an acronym out there at the time was called FAST. FAST still exists, but there's a B FAST now. They've added a couple more letters to the acronym. No longer a 4-letter acronym, now a 6-letter acronym. But we were familiar as a family with this acronym because my grandmother 6 months earlier had a stroke. And so we all kind of identified the signs. So the acronym to be aware of, and now this is the B FAST, is all the letters stand for something. B is for balance. And you already mentioned your balance is off. So if somebody just suddenly their balance is just not right, there's a sign that they may be having a stroke. The E is for eyes. If you're just having a bad time focusing, your vision's gone blurry, that's potentially a sign you've had a stroke or are having a stroke. F is for face. If you look at somebody and one side of their face is drooping, sign they're having a stroke. A is for arms. Ask somebody to put their arms up, and if one of the arms can't stay up and it drops, another sign they're having a stroke. S is for speech. If somebody's speech is slurred, obviously like you and I had, or inability to speak, sign they're having a stroke. And T is the most important thing, and T stands for time, because for both of us, the time was a huge aspect. Time to get to the hospital ASAP, so time to call 911. That's the biggest tool as somebody who is with someone else having a stroke, or if you have the ability to call 911 while you're having a stroke, that's the biggest tool you have. So be fast, balance, eyes, face, arms, speech, time to call 911. So that's just you need to remember that, because I can't remember the percentages, but I think it's somewhere as high as 25% of us at some point in time will have a stroke in our lives. Now, somebody should verify my numbers, because someone needs to audit that, because I'm not sure that's the number, but it is a significant number. So awareness is important, and I really appreciate the fact that you're telling your story, because that awareness is going to help people. Sorry, I rambled there for a little bit.
that was good though. I had several of them.
Exactly. So let's go back, because you reached out, and I appreciate it, to me about this, because you had been on a webinar where I had been talking about mental health awareness, which is so important, and hopefully one day you and I can do something like that together. Have you specifically gone out and sought help on the mental aspect of recovery?
Yes, very much so.
Okay, talking to counselors.
Yes, does help. And in terms of one thing that is since the stroke, I have taken 81 milligram aspirin a day.
Okay.
So that's kind of like I stopped within 6 months of the Coumadin regimen when I
Nice.
had the stroke.
Yep.
So they've kept me on the 81 milligrams of aspirin. And, this doctor says, don't, you read in the paper, you're not supposed to be taking it. I said to my doctor, and he says,
Right.
you know what, you want to live?
Yeah.
Take the pill.
Right. Yep. I'm on Plavix, which is a very, nowhere near the level of Coumadin from I don't have to be tested or anything, but I take one Plavix a day. It's, I think, supposed to be similar. I could probably go to the low dose aspirin as well, but my cardiologist is the one who recommended that. And so for you, the other thing I think is important to point out, because one of the questions that we all have is why. And for you, probably the shoveling the snow, the dissection.
Yep.
Obviously, the dissection is, but where did the dissection come from? And probably shoveling the snow. For me, the why. And for most, about 50% of strokes, you'll never know why.
Yeah.
It just, they can't discover. For me, I had a hole in my heart called a PFO. And they think that the clot formed on that hole, and rather than getting filtered through my lungs, it went straight up to my head and caused a block. A stroke is basically one of two things: a bleed in the brain or a blockage in the brain. And for me, it was a blockage in the brain. And when oxygen can't get to the brain, it causes damage. So anything that you want to add to the whole, stroke, the story, the recovery, the effects on the business, the awareness, anything else?
I have become aware of a couple of organizations. One is obviously the American Stroke Association.
Yep.
I do give some good charity to them. when you have a stroke or you need some guidance or some whatever type of materials or something, medical supplies and stuff, they're there for you. So that was definitely a pro to me.
Yep.
And then you would introduce me to another organization that if you could elaborate a little bit, that would be great.
Yep, I will definitely. So after my stroke, and again, I assume you did the same thing. You just want to reach out to somebody. You want to find answers. You want to. There's all these questions we have running through your heads, and so the organization that I found that really helped me the most, and American Stroke Association is I have given to them. I've supported them. I've been part of them. In fact, we as an organization that helped me the most is called Stroke Survivors Empowering Each Other. It's a mouthful. It's SSEEO.org is the website. When I had my stroke, I just found that they had so much information and so much help. I reached out to them. And when I reached out, the director, the president of the organization, and one of the board of directors members reached out to me, and we met, the three of them and they were just so helpful. And I started getting involved. Ended up a few years later, was on the board of directors. I think less than a year after being on the board of directors, I was president of the organization, and it's been a great organization. I actually introduced a gentleman to the organization on the board, and he's also in the accounting profession, and he is now the president. He took over for me about, oh man, I don't even know if it was a year and a half ago. I think that's it. But they're a great organization. I hosted a conference a couple months ago, which I got to see you there again, which was great. And we had them as one of our nonprofit sponsors. We gave them a booth so that we could raise awareness for stroke awareness. And so CO is a great organization. It's grassroots, but we've actually even teamed up with the American Stroke Association now to install some of the programs that we have developed at CO into the American Stroke Association as well. So that organization has been great for me. Thank you for asking that.
Yep, but I'm trying to get myself more involved in that one.
Okay, well, I will make that introduction or between you and David. And
it's nice to know that there are resources out there.
It definitely is. So I think we need to wrap up. But before we wrap up the stroke side of things, let's wrap up the stroke side of things. And then I want to ask you a couple final questions. But you just kind of did your wrap. I'm going to do mine again. Stroke. Just be aware that this can happen to anybody. There's a program out there what's it called? Stroke can happen at any age, because it can.
Can. I was 44.
I was 51. We've had people that we've supported in CO that are in their teens that have had a stroke. So this is not. And the funny thing was, when I went to the hospital, I'm in the neurology floor, whatever floor it was, the acute care floor. I can't remember what it was called. Mm-hmm. But they were saying, well, why are you here? You're too young to have a stroke. And they even said that. And that's something that's not true. Stroke can happen at any age. So don't just think I'm 80 years old. That's where I have to think I'm going to have a stroke. It can happen anytime. Sorry, Rich, you were going to say something?
No, that's a true statement, because my doctor said you were too young, never thought that it would be a stroke symptom.
Right. Exactly. And that's fortunately, at least when I went to the hospital, they did the MRI pretty quick. So they did, because they even said it in the hospital. Well, we don't think it's a stroke. I'm going, it was a stroke. I know it was a stroke. And my speech came back while I was in the hospital. So I was very fortunate for that. You, we had a similar experience, but I told them it was a stroke. They came in after they read in the MRI and they go, you're right, it was a stroke. I'm going, I knew it.
Yeah, you knew it.
Exactly. And so just be aware of that. Be aware of the Be Fast. Seek it out. Do your own research, because if it's not you, at some point in time, somebody is going to be affected by this. And so if you can be prepared, if you can be that person, if you could be the hero like my brother was to me to get me to the hospital quickly, that is so important, because time's the biggest thing you have. So anything you want to add to that, Rich?
No, like I say, if you have somebody that knows the Be Fast.
Yep.
My friend Susan, she did, and boy, I'm glad that happened.
Yep, we both have heroes. So, All right, so the final couple things. We're talking about this pretty heavy topic here today, stroke and all that. And you mentioned a few things already that you do outside of work, outside of being a stroke survivor, that you do for fun, which is, trying the guitar, but being out with people. What are your outside of work passions? Are there other things that?
I do.
Yeah.
I actually follow a European soccer league, the Premier League,
Oh,
and
nice.
I'm a big Man City fan.
All
So
right.
they were doing well last couple of years. We're having a little trouble this year, but it's a nice passion. Soccer keeps my attention. It's a game. It moves fast. There's no really start stops, and in 2 hours the games are over, and it's right in that attention span length for me.
Oh, okay. So good.
I can't do long 3 hour movies. College football's almost 3.5 hours.
Yep.
Mentally, I just can't do that anymore. So this
Yep.
is
Yep.
one of my passions is the following the Premier League.
Now, were you doing that before the stroke?
No,
Oh, really? So
no,
it's a new passion.
the new passion.
All right. And then if anybody wants to see anything more about you or reach out to you, what's the best way to find out more about Rich Kane?
Let's see. I'm on LinkedIn and I'm on Facebook. So you can definitely connect up with me there. Or you can pop Randy an email and he'll
Yep.
get me a message, and I'll give you a jingle back.
There you go. I noticed this morning, I don't know why, but we were not connected on LinkedIn. So I sent
That'd
you
be
a
great.
request this morning. So
Yes.
take a look at that and we'll connect. All right, Rich. Well, I am glad. I am not glad you went through a stroke, but I am glad you were a survivor because you did go through a stroke. And so I really appreciate you sharing your story and helping others. And if we can affect anything in a positive way, obviously, it's well worth it because I'd rather be here talking to you than not being here talking to you.
I agree. And I'm glad I met you because you give me more inspiration and more resources that didn't know was there. So thank you for all you do for this topic.
You got it, Rich. Appreciate it. And thanks everybody for sticking with us today on listening to this very important topic to us, but to everybody. And I hope none of you ever have to go through this, but if you do, remember, be fast.
Thank you for joining us today on the Unique CPA. You can find the show notes for today's episode and learn more about TriMerit at theuniquecpa.com. Remember to subscribe and leave a 5-star rating on your favorite podcasting app. And join us next time for more expertise and insights on the Unique CPA. Professionalproductions.net